Good morning. My name is Cindy Hackett, and I serve you as a member of the Board of Trustees of the Tahoma Unitarian Universalist congregation. Thank you for joining us from far and near on this most spectacular, heading towards super hot morning. Stay cool. My current church space, like yours, is our home. I miss being in actual community, but I love that we can gather in virtual community. I sing, I laugh, I cry. I say the chalice lighting and closing words. I speak the kids out as Nancy does. I support this beloved community with our financial resources as we are able. We are a community of people seeking truth, justice, and love. We are of varied ages, races, gender identities, sexual orientations, economic status, and spiritual foundations. Whoever you are, whatever gifts, joys, and sorrows you bring, we welcome you to join our caravan as we make this enlightening journey together. If you are new to our gathering, please let us know your names in the chat and consider including your email so we can add you to our e-news mailing list. If you're feeling in need of a little help from your friends, please let us know. We offer many ways to connect: e-news, webpage, Facebook page, and we look forward to widening our circle. I have a few announcements this morning. Following worship, children and their families are invited to join Nancy Slocum for Kids Chapel. And at 4 p.m. on Sundays, Nancy also hosts a religious exploration program for middle schoolers. For either program, you can email Nancy for the login information and look for her chat, look for her login information, or rather her email, whoops, in the chat. Some of the adult religious exploration programs this week include movie meetup tonight at 5 p.m. with Arian Babcock, our interim minister. Dave and I both participate in that, and it has been quite enlightening. On Monday at 7 p.m., the Pagan group hosts an exploration of Lunasid. Reverend Linda will host Poetry for the Soul, and you can register online to attend. That will be on Wednesday. And on Friday at 7 p.m. on a new day and time, so take note of that, Doug Taylor will facilitate Heart and Soul Circle. And you can also register online for that program. Also, and this was left out of the e-news, but it is on the calendar from the webpage, as will be the login information. The Board of Trustees will be meeting Thursday, August 20th at 7 p.m. to do the work of the church. The meeting is open, and the Zoom login, as I said, can be found on the church calendar, and you'll see that from our webpage. And I think, and so more for, I think that's it for our announcements, although tune in because you never know what else we're going to conjure up. So now, let's center our hearts and our minds. Breathe in, breathe out, smile, and prepare to gather in worship together.
Good morning, my friends. It is so good to be with you this morning. Our opening words are from Meg Barnhouse. Okay, I get it. Nerves are frayed, tempers are irrationally employed. Words come out of our mouths that we thought would never leave the haven of our minds. Did I really just say that out loud? I'm feeling unreasonable, demanding. I want someone, anyone, to solve this mess. Just get COVID over with, please. Wave your wand. I want my life back, or some semblance thereof. I want to get on with the new normal. No more of this interminable waiting. Give me hope, damn it. Something to believe in, and don't lie to me. While we're at it, can I ask that magically, suddenly, immediately, Black Lives Matter or Brown Lives Matter? I want to call the question. A fairy tale ending, it must be where we all live happily ever after. In the meantime, while I'm waiting for you to do something about this, I'm cranky, impatient, over it. I believe they call it pandemic leak, when the once perfectly rational, objective person becomes unrecognizable, presenting instead as rabid. Might I suggest that the time for saviors is long past? Answers, solutions, ways forward come from the hive mind and heart now. Stop the whining. Quit the wallow in the privilege of despair. Welcome to the work. Let us begin.
At this time, please join me and Nancy, who will be lighting the chalice. If you look in the chat, the words for the chalice lighting are there. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and the holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who've gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Nancy Slocum. I am the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth here at Tahoma Unitarian Universalist Congregation. It is great to be here on this beautiful summer morning and great to have all of you here. This is the time for our Time for All Ages. This is the time when typically when we're here together in the sanctuary, we invite the children and those young at heart to come on up front to hear a story. So gather close to your computer screens and your iPad screens and whatever device you're on for our Time for All Ages. When I was a young girl, I loved to read. I was often called a bookworm, and I read all kinds of books. One of my favorite books, though, was a book that was given to me by my grandparents. It was a book of fairy tales by Hans Christian Andersen. And if you don't know Hans Christian Andersen, you may know some of his work. He's an author who was born over 200 years ago in Denmark, which is in Northern Europe. And he wrote lots of books about lots of things, but he is best remembered for his books of fairy tales. You may know some of them: The Little Mermaid, Thumbelina, The Ugly Duckling, The Emperor's New Clothes. Now, he didn't make up all of these stories necessarily. A lot of them were folk tales that had been passed down for generations and generations, but he wrote them up and published them in books so that they could be accessible to a lot of people, including me a couple hundred years later with that beloved book that I got from my grandparents. And I loved reading those fairy tales because they were full of all kinds of magic and possibility. So this week when Reverend Linda told me that the topic for today was discomfort, about being uncomfortable, I immediately thought of one of Hans Christian Andersen's stories. It's called The Princess and the Pea. Maybe you've heard it. For those of you who haven't, though, let me tell the story briefly. In the story of The Princess and the Pea, we learn of a prince. Fairy tales are just full of princes and princesses. And this prince is looking for a wife. He wants to find someone to marry. And one thing that's very important to him is that his wife be a princess. So he begins a search far and wide throughout the land looking for a princess. And when people hear that he's looking for a princess. There's a lot of people who decide, well, maybe he'll marry them. And they dress in their finest clothing and they go and they pretend to be a princess. And they try to get the prince to marry him. And the prince starts getting very discouraged because he never finds a true princess. He only finds these women that are dressing up, pretending to be princesses. Well, one evening he's at home with the queen and there's a terrible storm raging outside. It's thunder and lightning and lots of rain. And this bedraggled woman shows up at the door, knocking at the door, looking for a place to spend the night because she's out in the rain and the storm. And at some point, it comes out that she is a princess. And she sure doesn't look like one. She's dripping wet. She's got mud all over her clothing, but she just needs a place to spend the night. The prince and his mother think, well, what's the chance she is a princess? Maybe she's a princess. Let's test this out. So the test they decide to do is that the queen goes into the bedroom and she takes a tiny pea, a little dried pea, goes into the guest room and she places the pea under the mattress. And then she piles 20 mattresses on top of that pea. And then 20 feather beds on top of those mattresses. Layers and layers. It's a big stack of mattresses and feather beds for this princess to sleep on. Only a true princess, they believe, will be able to feel something as small as a pea under all those layers. Well, in the morning, the visitor comes out of the bedroom for breakfast and the prince says, how was your night? Did you sleep well? People often ask that when guests have slept in the guest room. And the woman replies, she says, well, truthfully, there was something very, very hard in the bed and I just couldn't get comfortable. I tossed and I turned all night and I woke up and I have bruises all over my body from it. Now, when a host hears this news from a guest, often they say, oh, I'm so sorry. But instead, the prince was delighted because he believed he had found a true princess to marry. And they did get married. And as often is the case in fairy tales, it is told that they lived happily ever after. Quite a story. It feels a little old to me. I don't know of any princes in my neighborhood that are searching far and wide for a princess to marry. And I find myself wondering why being able to feel a pea under many mattresses is a quality anyone would really be looking for in a husband or a wife. I know that sometimes I go camping, and I get my bedroll all out. I put my sleeping pad down and my sleeping bag down, and then I lie down and I realize there's a rock under there. And so what do? Do I lie there tossing and turning all night? No. I get out of my bed and I find the rock and maybe I move the mattress or maybe I can move the rock so that I can sleep comfortably. And I kind of wonder why the princess didn't do the same. Get out of bed and feel around and find out what was causing all that pain to her. But instead, she chose to just endure it and then get up in the morning and complain. Well, for whatever reason, our prince decided he wanted to spend his life with this woman. And he did. He found something in her that he liked. And all of us have the experience of going through life looking for people to spend time with, whether it's someone to marry or someone to have as a friend. And we often look for people who have similar interests as ours. I like having people in my life who like to go for hikes and go camping and kayaking, people who like to go to movies and talk about books. And if you think about your friends, you might see that it's the people that you share interests with that are your closest friends. But I think another quality that we look for in friends is where they have discomfort and what they do with that. What are the things that upset them, that make them feel uncomfortable? I remember back when I was in school, I met lots of new people. And sometimes I met people who were uncomfortable being around people who didn't wear the most fashionable clothing, or people whose families didn't have a lot of money. Those things don't make me uncomfortable, so I never really clicked with those people. Those weren't the people that I wanted to be friends with. I've met people who show discomfort when they're around people who are from different countries and maybe speak a different language other than English. Personally, I love meeting people from other countries and learning about their lives. So again, being around people who are uncomfortable and avoid people who are different from them aren't the people that I'm drawn to spend time with. Over the years, I've made lots of friends from a lot of different places in my life. I've found people who like to kayak and camp and hike, people who love movies and books like I do, and we enjoy doing things together. The people I'm closest to are the people who also share some of the same discomforts I have. We're uncomfortable when we hear about things or witness things like racism, where people are discriminated against or even hated because of the color of their skin. We are uncomfortable when we see people who have no place to live, who are homeless and have to live on the streets. We are uncomfortable when we hear people polluting the earth and not caring about keeping our environment healthy for future generations. We share our discomforts. And here's the really important part. Remember our princess who couldn't even bother to get out of bed and check for what was hurting her? All she could do was complain and whine about it later. But my friends and I, when we feel these discomforts, we're moved to try and make a difference. We ease the discomfort. We take action. We fight against the injustices we see in the world. We're always trying to make the world a better place. If I were to write a modern day version of a fairy tale, rather than focusing on a prince looking for a princess, it might start with a family looking for people to help them work to create justice in the world. The test would not be a pea under a mattress, but would be asking the question, what are the things that make you uncomfortable? Where does your discomfort lie? And what are you willing to do about those discomforts? And in my modern day tale, I might have the family walking up the steps into a Unitarian Universalist church for the very first time and having them discover a lot of people who share their discomforts and team up with them to help make the world a better place. And with a lot of work in my fairy tale, everyone will live happily ever after. As we always do in our service, when kids leave at this point to go to their classes, we share these words. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious life, we hold you in our love as you go. Thank you.
And now, as we gather together, we remember that this space, this place, this community that we care for so much, it still requires our care and our money. Please open your hearts and open your wallets and help this church to stay strong and healthy and vibrant. Just click on the donate buttons on the TahomaUU.com site or text your donation to the number on your screen. And please join with me in the dedication of the offering. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
I invite you to take a few deep breaths and settle in as we pause for a few moments of quiet and reflection together, a time for prayer or meditation, or simply holding the stillness. And we'll come into that time with these words, a poem called Uncertain Feet by Christine Norcross. We are living in the now time of uncertain feet and tissue paper plans. To see beyond requires a willingness to hold the railing when we don't know where the stairs lead. So we stand 6 feet apart, take comfort in the small things we can share, like the recipe for lentil soup or a photo of wildflowers from our morning walk. How odd to move forward when it feels like we're on a bridge to nowhere. The secret is simply to move every day and remember how our hands once connected in greeting. We will touch palms again. My friends, let us pause in stillness together. So may it be. Amen.
Our reading this morning is The Voice of God by Mary Karr. 90% of what's wrong with you could be cured with a hot bath, says God from the bowels of the subway. But we want magic to win the lottery we never bought a ticket for. Tenderly, the monks chant, embrace the suffering. The voice of God does not pander, offers no 5-year plan, no long-term solution, nary an edict. It is a small and fond and local. Don't look for your initials in the geese honking overhead or to see through the glass even darkly. It says the most obvious crap. Put down that gun. You need a sandwich.
Many years ago now, my colleague Kendall Gibbons was serving a suburban Chicago congregation that had outgrown its building. She and church leaders consulted with Lyle Schaller, a church growth specialist who happened to live nearby, and they asked him about the best strategies for the process of expanding their building. Schaller's advice to them was useful. Build the sanctuary last, he told them. That was his best advice. They were puzzled by his advice. Their worship space was tiny and, if I'm completely honest, pretty ugly. And I know that because I had been in it multiple times. They were outgrowing the 2 services that they already held, but Schaller was insistent about this. Build your space for religious explorations and staff offices first, he encouraged them. And then he explained, once the adults get comfortable, nothing more will get done. Kendall told me this story while we were in the bright and beautiful common area of the congregation. Her comfortable office was just steps away off this large, airy gathering space that had a commercial quality kitchen and bright, spacious classrooms for Sunday morning religious education and for meetings in the evening. The sanctuary was still tiny and ugly, and it would be for more than a decade before they built their sanctuary. Once the adults get comfortable. For decades, I've told this story when talking about church growth. Some of you, I think, have probably heard it from me multiple times. Just put another hashtag right there where you're keeping score of how many times I tell this story. And I have to say, I've probably, gotten to that stage in life where my favorite stories are just told again and again. So be prepared to hear it again sometime. This story, though, took a twist over the last few months as we grapple with this new reality of living in the time of the virus. We know more about discomfort these days than most of us have in a long time, I suspect. We're restricted to our homes, constrained in our ability to do as we please, and watching our national government fail to even address the medical crisis that has overtaken us. We're in the midst of an assault on democracy that is unmatched, I think, in the whole history of our country, save perhaps the Civil War, with rampant voter suppression and efforts, including attacking our National Postal Service. If your anxiety level isn't skyrocketing at this moment, you're not paying enough attention. Even with that, we're also seeing massive positive movements to address things like systemic racism that has been a part of our country from its founding. I've mentioned before the astonishing rise of books about racism and anti-racism filling the bestseller lists in the country. They're books that are trying to educate those of us who think of ourselves as white about what the world is like outside our own little bubble of privilege. It's a legitimate question to ask if anyone is actually reading those books. I'll have to confess that as one with a massive library of unread books, I'm familiar with that practice of owning books that never get read. In fact, it's a long-standing, almost tradition in Unitarian Universalist ministerial circles, so well known that years ago, Chris Rabel, one of my colleagues, wrote a parody about it in which he invited us to sing, "Forward through the pages, never read a line." But I digress. We are in a time of great transformation. No doubt about that. The outcome, however, is not at all clear. And I find myself thinking, the adults aren't comfortable yet, so we'll keep working to make things better. Right? Right? We who have some small measure of power by virtue of our participation in the systems of government, voting, contacting our representatives on all levels of that governmental structure, putting our socially distanced mask-wearing bodies into the street to raise awareness, to chant and march, sending letters to other voters, phone banking, text banking, donations to candidates we support. We are all, at least in some measure, activated now and taking part as we are able. We want to understand how the killing of George Floyd, for example, is a logical outcome of the centuries of racial oppression that is a built-in feature of our culture and the structures of our country. We are trying to get informed and trying to find ways to be conspirators in working for change for ourselves and making a difference. I don't really need to outline all of the threats that we face, you know. You're living in the midst of it too. You feel it, I suspect, in your muscles and your bones and in your heart. Now, a mentor once told me that I should stay away from those who only have bad news. And some days I really feel like I'm in that camp, only bad news to tell. But I do see some possibility and promise in these days too. For example, there has been an awakening to the reality of ongoing systemic racism and a willingness to confront it. If it's only white people, myself included, starting to examine their complicity and to seek to dismantle it. I think of the white mothers showing up in Portland, facing tear gas and flashbangs and brutality to protect protesters out there proclaiming that Black Lives Matter. That gives me a glimmer of hope. I think we're also far more aware of the destruction of our democratic norms and systems that's been going on for many decades at this point. We can more clearly see the damage that is being done to us by the increasing power of the oligarchy. Much of what has been lost in our safety nets could be restored simply by reining in and perhaps reversing the movement of wealth to the already outrageously wealthy. Those are just a couple of places where I see some possibility and promise. You likely see it in other places of destruction and problems. And you likely have some solutions to the problems and the destruction that surround us right now. But what is most essential in all of this, I think, is that we act to ease our discomfort with what is. What is most essential is to have our voices heard in this time of chaos and change. What is most essential is that we use the ache and the worry that we feel to do something that makes a difference. Discomfort is a catalyst for change. When we get comfortable, it is far too easy to lose the sense of urgency. If it's not having a direct impact on us, it is so easy to forget it. Lyle Schaller had it just right all those years ago. When those with the power get comfortable, they too easily forget those whose discomfort they don't see or experience. It's true in church buildings, and it's true in the rest of our lives too. Discomfort is a catalyst for change, and we need to leverage it to make as much positive good as we can before we yet again lose sight of what needs to be done. And don't be fooled. Those of us who get comfortable and relax will, unless we find those ways to keep us engaged and active. 2 weeks ago, I invited you to watch a video of a caterpillar turning into a butterfly and the discomfort that there was in turning completely to goo before it transformed. The discomfort of being almost fully dissolved is akin to what we're experiencing now. And I pray that it is moving us to deeper engagement in making a change. It's been nearly 4 years since the Sunday after the 2016 election. And on that Sunday morning, I reminded us that what we love and care about and what we are called to embody in the world did not change with that election. It is as true now as it was then, though we couldn't have known how dire the circumstances would be at this point. As with those enduring imaginal discs that guide the massive goo of a caterpillar dissolved to become a butterfly, we have our principles to guide us. Remember that we affirm the worth and dignity of each and all of us, that we believe in the promise and the possibility of justice and equity for all. Let us drill down to that reminder that at the core of everything is an abiding love for this fragile creation that sustains and supports us, and for these siblings and partners in our human family. And down underneath all of that, knowing that we cannot be separated from all that is, that we are part of an inescapable web of mutuality, that we are intimately connected to all that is, though our foolishness and our blindness often get in the way of our seeing it clearly. My friends, we have a world to heal. In all of this, let us find comfort where we can. Maybe it's in the love of a companion animal's warm body in a lap or leaning into you. Maybe it's in seeing a beloved face in a small box on FaceTime or on Zoom. Maybe it is, yes, a hot bath, or the recipe for lentil soup, or the memory of when our hands touched, or when we were able to lean into the embrace of a beloved friend. Find comfort where you can. It's essential. But hold on to your discomfort too, for it can, and I believe, will change the world. And what else are we called to do but to change the world, to make it more fair and whole for us all? So may it be. Amen. I invite you now to pause and breathe, to take a few moments to set an intention. If there has been something in our service today, in the words or the images, in the stillness or in the singing, I invite you to set an intention for how you will take it out into the world. Let us pause. So may it be. We return to our opening words for our closing words. Meg said, answers, solutions, way forward come from hive mind and heart now. Stop the whining. Quit the wallow in the privilege of despair. Welcome to the work. Let us begin. Let us carry on. Let us make it happen. So may it be. Amen. And blessed be.
And now, if you'll join with me in this extinguishing of the chalice as Nancy extinguishes the flame, let's join in our closing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this